This from Jeff to open up the show. Jeff C. Jeff C. writes, Coach Sheehan, why would you want Jaden to play in a preseason game without his starting center and his main protector, Allegretti and Tunsil? You're just asking for trouble. I'll get to Jeff's email here in a moment. Good morning, everybody. We'll talk to CJ. We'll talk CJ Abrams. We're not going to be talking to CJ Abrams. We're going to be talking CJ Abrams and Nats with Mark Zuckerman on the show at 11 a.m. He's the only guest scheduled so far for today. The team is practicing in Ashburn. Dan Quinn did speak about an hour ago. No update, not ready to say yet who and who won't play Saturday in Detroit. Perhaps the practices both yesterday and today will dictate his answer, and maybe we'll find out later today, probably worst case tomorrow or Thursday. To Jeff, who, I think makes a good point. Look, I think this argument, and we have it every preseason, and it's not one of my favorite conversations, but it is an August 19th conversation before a second preseason game. And that is this idea of should they play their starters or shouldn't they play their starters? When Jeff says without the starting center and without Laramie Tunsil, you're just asking for trouble. It's fair. Now, I think Allegretti would be a big part for me in making the decision. Part of why I'd want to see the starters out there, the starting offense out there, the starting quarterback out there is he does have a brand new center. They haven't played in an actual game together. There's a new offensive coordinator. There's another new receiver. There's a new tight end. I'd like to see it. You're not convincing me to come off my position, but I understand the other side. I also think from your side, Jeff, it'd be fair to point out, and you didn't do this, but I'll do it for you, that without the ability to game plan, not that they can't game plan, but they don't, you can't take out the serious threats to your quarterback or to your offense in general. When you're not game planning, you're not identifying who are the players on the other side of the ball that could really create havoc on any given play. Let's just take Detroit as an example. Aiden Hutchinson's a pretty good football player. I have no idea if he's going to play or not play in the preseason game on Saturday. But, when you're not game planning and you're not taking out a serious threat like Aiden Hutchinson, you're actually putting your quarterback and your offense in general even at more risk. Look, it's an argument that works both ways, I think. Honestly, I still would rather get a new offense, a new coordinator, a new center, new everything, basically, both sides of the ball. I'd rather see it in dress rehearsal form before rolling it out for the first time together on September 13th on the road against an opponent that's won a lot of games in recent years and is pretty experienced. Now, they have a new offensive coordinator, but they have a new offensive coordinator every year. But against Vic Fangio and company in the opener, yeah, I'd just prefer that they get comfortable playing some football because that's what they do. And there's always risk, including the risk when they're going out to practice. And joint practices last week, one next week as well. Did you see the story from Oxnard, California, site of Cowboys training camp? Yesterday, the Cowboys and the Saints were holding a joint practice session, and all hell broke loose. Punches thrown, helmets tossed. At one point, Saints tight end Brock Reichsteiner, is that how you pronounce it? Or you're more of a WWE guy than I am?
I was hoping you'd get to this.
Is that how you pronounce it,
Yep.
Reichsteiner?
Yep, that's it.
He's the son of WWE Hall of Famer Scott Steiner. He grabbed a Cowboys player, lifted him up, and body slammed him to the turf. I wish it had been somebody like Dak Prescott or CeeDee Lamb, but it wasn't. Yeah, I think I read this to you guys last week. I think I did. Aaron Rodgers was asked last week before the Steelers' first preseason game against Green Bay, his former team, whether or not he was going to play. And he said, a number of things about preseason and joint practices. And something he said about joint practices turned out to be pretty prophetic. But he said, it's preseason. It's not real football. If I play, great. If not, great. He was asked whether or not there is an advantage to playing in the preseason for somebody like him. And he just said, I don't think so. He said preseason's a lot different. Teams don't run anything. They just really don't. And then he got into joint practices, and he said, on the subject of joint practices, he said, I think the first year we were doing them, it was fun because you got to play a team that wasn't going to play how they played in preseason. They were going to show you a lot of different things that they were working on. It was like a real day at camp, but as that got on, it just stopped being like that. It just turned into fights and nobody showed anything. I think those are a total waste of a day. Closed quote. Yeah, that was pretty spot on with what happened in California yesterday at Cowboys camp. Both coaches considered, Schottenheimer and the Saints coach Kellen Moore considered shutting the whole thing down, but they let it continue after the big brawl broke out. I remember the Texans in Richmond. I was there that day. The Texans in Richmond for a joint practice with the Skins, 2015. They did it with the Patriots, maybe in 2015. Maybe it was 2014 with the Texans.
Is that the infamous D'Angelo Hall incident?
Yeah, I mean, it was all hell broke loose. I mean, and it was actually the chippiness of it. I actually remember saying, "This is probably good. This is this is getting out of that comfort zone of, in shorts against your own team, and it's more like a real Sunday afternoon. This joint practice is a good thing, but it's certainly." Based on what Rodgers said, there's not a lot of value because teams aren't showing anything. It's essentially like the preseason game extended in scrimmage form. So, Washington does have one more joint practice, and they have two more preseason games. Look, this is really for them. This is a them, answer. The people that are in it, they know whether or not there's really something to be gotten with starting players, the players that you're going to play in the regular season from these preseason games. And even, whether or not it makes sense to try stuff that you're going to run in the regular season, even in joint practices. We know that they don't do anything in the preseason game. I mean, did you see how vanilla and how basic the defense was under Durante Jones in the preseason game? I don't want him showing anything. Of course not. These are player evaluation games, period. And the player evaluation really is for roster spots 40 through 53, or call it 45 through 70, because you've got the 17-player practice squad. It's really what it comes down to, is that nobody's making a major decision on your starters and your contributors, unless there are, of course, injuries, or unless somebody just completely wows you, or unless you actually enter camp with a legitimate competition at a position. But for the most part, 90% of it is evaluating players that you will eventually select for roster spots 45 through 70. That's a base. And by the way, I'm not minimizing the importance of that. It is important. It's very important. But that's what you get. And Jaden Daniels is not being evaluated for roster spot 45 through 70. Nor are Stephon Diggs, Terry McLaurin, Chigakonkwo, Josh Connerly Jr., Sam Cosmi, etc. Dan Quinn spoke before camp. We've got some sound. We'll play it for you. I had to talk about this here, though, in the open of the show. So the NFL Top 100 list, which is the list that the players vote on, and NFL.com unveils a certain number of players every day. During weeks, they essentially unveil like 10 players a week. Right now, they are in the rundown from 20 to 11 this week. And yesterday, they had the number 18 player and the number 17 player unveiled. Keep in mind, we've already talked about the fact that this list actually ranked Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson was ranked 69th on this list. And so already the credibility of this list is in question. There's not a lot of specific information about what kind of criteria there is. Like the description essentially says, honoring the best NFL players of the year and the best players of 2026. So it's kind of last year and this year. Clearly, the players are voting on what happened last year. Like Jaden Daniels was number 21 on last year's list. He didn't play last year hardly at all, and he's not going to be in the top 100. So the players clearly feel like the directive is to evaluate the 2025 season and vote on players that way. Because Patrick Mahomes was 18. On what planet would players in the NFL vote Patrick Mahomes as the 18th best player in the league, or Lamar Jackson, the 69th best player in the league?
And Kev, do you want to know who went from unranked to ahead of Patrick Mahomes at 17?
Hold on. I see 17. It's Jonathan Taylor.
Correct.
Well, is that because he didn't play in 2024?
Not a ton, which I understand. Like Jonathan Taylor, it's great, not better than Patrick Mahomes.
The players clearly believe, and maybe it's been made clear to them and not as clear to the consumer of this, that you're voting on what happened in 2025. And Patrick Mahomes was hurt. And by the way, before he got hurt, without much of a supporting cast, he was struggling. The Chiefs were struggling offensively. Jaden Daniels went from 21 to off this list because he didn't play. He played in 7 total games, 4 start to finish. Out of sight, out of mind. But like when I saw that this morning, because it was making the rounds on social media, and I looked at it before the show, I'm like, what? Like, this list is stupid. What are we doing here? Why would we, first of all, why would you ask players to vote for the best players of 2025 and then unveil it on the eve of the new season? Every list you want to read, every rankings you want to read at this point is based on what you think will happen in 2026. We know what happened in 2025. That Patrick Mahomes, if you were starting a team for the next 10 years or you were starting a season for a team, he can't be any lower than 2. It's Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes in some order. Justin Jefferson's 19. That's because Minnesota really struggled last year. This is clearly a last year list, which actually makes me wonder who will be number 1 on this list. Sam Darnold isn't number 1. He's number 21. Sam Darnold is the 21st best player in the league. Come on. Who would be number 1? Somebody. Is Kenneth Walker going to end up on this list in the top 20, or is he already on it? I don't know. Is it JSN? Is he going to be you know what? He's going to be the top player in the league, isn't he? Or Drake May. Drake May might be the number 1 player in the league.
May hasn't even been put on here yet. Yeah, it's May.
It's going to be the players that had great seasons, JSN, that were vying for. Well, I guess Matt Stafford won the MVP. Matt Stafford's probably going to be the number 1 player. Yeah. Look, if I were starting a season, Matt Stafford would be on the short list. The quarterbacks, I don't know. I feel like this list in previous years wasn't done this way. That this is the first year we've been shocked by some of the rankings. Lamar Jackson at 69. Bo Nix is in front of Lamar Jackson. Jalen Hurts, Caleb Williams, Jared Goff, Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold is 48 spots ahead of Lamar Jackson. Come on, man. I know Lamar hasn't won a lot, hasn't necessarily done a lot in the postseason. Lamar Jackson is still, worst case, a top 25 player in the league, a top 10 quarterback. He's not going to be in the top 10. So I wanted to share with you something that I read late yesterday, which I really, this is more of an NFL historic conversation, but I love it because it illustrates something about the player that I was just talking about and his team that they're going to have to change in the next few years. And that would be Jackson and the Ravens. I'll get to that next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. All right, longtime Skins fans, put on your thinking caps. The best team we've ever had here that didn't make it to the Super Bowl. Aaron Schatz, the creator of the DVOA metric, which I reference a lot on this show as a much better way to evaluate teams and teams units, offense, defense, special teams, had a story yesterday on ESPN.com where he went back during the Super Bowl era to find and rank the best NFL teams of all time that didn't make it to the Super Bowl. It's not teams that got to the Super Bowl like the '07 Patriots and lost. It's teams that the best teams in the history of the league that didn't make it to the Super Bowl. The NFL is littered with those examples because of the one and done nature of the postseason. Is you can have a dominant regular season and have one bad day and be out. It's the drama of one and done. It's what makes the NFL playoffs so great. It's what makes March Madness so great. Series typically result best ofs, 5s or 7s, with the better team winning when you play up to 7 games. One game, not so much. So Aaron Schatz had his rankings in the number one team in the history of the Super Bowl era to not make the Super Bowl, the best team to not make the Super Bowl, the 2023 Baltimore Ravens, the team that lost to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game 17-10. That 23 Ravens team was really, really good. And I think everybody thought that that particular Ravens team was going to be the team that got over the hump. They had home field advantage throughout. Lamar Jackson had another sensational year. They were surging into the postseason. They literally destroyed Miami at the end of the season, 56-19, where they rolled up like 500 yards of offense. They were awesome at times. They blew out the Niners on Christmas night that year. That game was on the road, and they blew out the Texans to really sort of announce, hey, this is a new Lamar Jackson in the postseason. Lamar had a great game that particular day, 16 of 22, 152 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He rushed 11 times for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, and they beat the Texans 34-10. And then they went into that AFC Championship game with the game at M&T Bank, and the Ravens favored. They were 4.5-point favorites to get to the Super Bowl. I actually thought that entire season, man, this Ravens team is the real deal. This is one of the best defensive teams we've seen in a long time, and just flat out one of the best teams we've seen in a long time. And then came the AFC Championship game, 2 fumbles lost 3 total turnovers, couple of drop passes, and they lose at home 17-10. And as we know, Lamar Jackson has not been with the Ravens as the starting quarterback to a Super Bowl. His playoff career has not been good. As a playoff quarterback, he is 3-5 as a starter. And he has not played well. He's got 10 touchdowns, 7 picks, 4 fumbles. His completion percentage in these playoff games has been much lower, typically, than his season completion percentage. The Ravens, the number one all-time best team not to make the Super Bowl per the Aaron Schatz DVOA metric. You can take DVOA and put it out of your mind. I want to hear from you about our team in a moment. The number 2 all-time team not to make the Super Bowl, I've actually referenced this team a lot over the years. The 1976 Pittsburgh Steelers were probably the second best defensive team after the 85 Bears of all time. You know, people will say, well, you got the 2000 Ravens, you've got the 2002 Buccaneers. There are other examples of great defensive teams. The 1976 Pittsburgh Steelers shut out 5 teams. They had 5 games in which the other team did not score a point. They had 8 of their 14 regular season games. It was a 14-game regular season schedule back then, where the teams they played scored 6 points or less. Terry Bradshaw got hurt that year, ended up playing in just 8 of the 14 regular season games. He did come back, and he was available for the postseason, but they did not have home field advantage. Mike Kruzek, who actually played at Boston College and is from here, played at St. John's, high school-wise, Military Road St. John's. And he quarterbacked the Steelers while Bradshaw was out. They went 10-4. They blew out the Colts in a divisional playoff game in Baltimore, and then they got beat by the 76 Raiders. That was the time the Raiders got the Steelers in the AFC title game. They lost 24-7. The Raiders went on and blew out Minnesota in the Super Bowl. But that 76 Steelers team, the defense, probably up there in any conversation after you start the conversation with the 85 Bears. The 85 Bears, to me, and I think any measurement will tell you that's the greatest defense in the history of the NFL. Certainly in the Super Bowl era. You know, I don't know. You could probably go back and find some Chicago Bears teams of the 40s that were great defensively. But in terms of the Super Bowl era, the 76 Steelers are second, I think, to the Bears. But the Bears are clearly one. That was the number 2 team on Aaron Schatz's list of the greatest teams never to make it to the Super Bowl. The rest of the list, I'll just run through. The 2010 Patriots were third, and then the 2024 Ravens, who lost to the Bills in that divisional round playoff game where Mark Andrews couldn't hold on to the 2-point conversion. Dropped it with, over a minute left in the game. People tend to kind of mix up the legend of the end of that game as if that catch was the difference between winning and losing the game. It actually wasn't. It was a catch that would have tied the game, and then Buffalo would have gotten the ball with a chance to win in regulation. Who knows what happens the rest of the way, but they had over a minute left. And Lamar played okay in that game, but he had a couple of turnovers in the game that were crucial. So the Ravens actually have 2 of the top 4 all-time teams that didn't make the Super Bowl. This is where, when you get into the Ravens and the Lamar Jackson conversation, and it's a good conversation, and it's a fair conversation. He's a great player. He is, when he's healthy, especially. I mean, he is a 2-time MVP. He's going to the Hall of Fame. I mean, his career is already, with 2 MVPs, with 4 AP first team all selections, he's probably a Hall of Famer at 29 years old already. But that's not how he's going to go down. He's not going to go down as one of the greatest of all time. He's going to be a conversation that people say, yeah, but like Tony Romo, like, Dan Marino, I love throwing Tony Romo in there. He's not a Hall of Famer. He couldn't get it done when it mattered the most in the postseason. He's still got time. The Ravens still have time. The Cowboys of 1968, don't ask me about them, were number 5. The 73 Rams, the 87 Niners were 7. They would have played Washington in the NFC Championship game had they not gone down in the divisional round to the Vikings. That was Washington's Super Bowl 22 team. They got a home NFC Championship game against Minnesota because Minnesota upset the number 1 seed, and that was San Francisco. If you didn't know that, the 87 Super Bowl Redskins were not the 1 seed. They were in position more. The 49ers were a heavy favorite going into that postseason. Then they got beat by the Vikings at home. It's one of the bigger upsets in NFL history. The Vikings were double-digit underdogs in that game. And they went into Candlestick and won, and then came to Washington, and Washington won that NFC title game 17-10. The 2022 Bills were 8th on this list, and then the list keeps going. I will just mention that there is not one Washington team on Aaron Schatz's list, which is the top 16 greatest NFL teams of all time not to make the Super Bowl. My question to you, and this is for some of you who've been around for a while, and we'll see whether or not you come up with it. What is the greatest Washington team, the greatest Redskins team, the greatest Washington football team, the greatest Commanders team to not make it to the Super Bowl? You can't pick the 83 Skins because they made it to the Super Bowl. And that team would have, if that team had lost, say, to the 49ers in the NFC Championship game, they would be near the top of the list that Aaron Schatz just put out. Because that 83 Redskins team was a dominant football team, especially on offense. And they still hold the largest turnover margin in NFL history at plus 42. But Washington set the mark that year for the most points ever scored by an NFL team. It was 541. They averaged 33.8 points per game, and that was the highest scoring NFL season in the moment. Their defense was not great, but they turned people over, which made it very effective. And over a 16-game schedule, they lost 2 games by a grand aggregate total of 2 points. They lost to the Cowboys to open up that season at home on Monday Night Football, 31-30, and they lost another Monday Night Football game at Lambeau in October of that year to the Packers, 48-47. The only 2 losses that year, 2 points away from a perfect season. But they crushed the Rams, and then they held on for dear life and probably got a couple of good calls to go their way to win the NFC Championship game over Montana and the 49ers at RFK. And then they were in the Super Bowl where they got blown out by the Raiders in Super Bowl 18. So you can't cite the 83 Skins because they made the Super Bowl. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. The greatest Redskins team to not make the Super Bowl. Probably could have done something like the greatest Redskins team to not make the playoffs, because over the last 34 seasons, obviously we've had one opportunity, or maybe 2 or 3, with really good teams. But you probably have to go back a ways to come up with an answer, although maybe the answer is something more recently. 301-230-0980. I actually wrote down 3 Redskin teams that I think would vie for the best Redskin team of all time not to make the Super Bowl. Again, this has to be Super Bowl era, so you can't take me back to some Sammy Baugh team that didn't win the NFL championship. 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, theteam980.com. Don't forget, you can watch this show on our Team 980 YouTube channel. Just hit the subscribe button and hit the like button when you get there. Best Redskins, Washington football team, Commanders team not to make the Super Bowl. I think you got to go back a long way. This is sort of off of the Aaron Schatz rankings of the greatest NFL teams in the Super Bowl era to not make the Super Bowl. Number one on the list, the 23 Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens had two of the top four. The 23 team and the 24 team are in his top four. The 76 Steelers, I consider to be the second greatest defensive team in NFL history after the 85 Bears. They were number two on this list. But what about our team? It's the best team we've ever had that didn't make the Super Bowl. Look, you can't, there's nothing of recent vintage. I mean, there just isn't. I mean, you could go to 2024 if you want, but the defense wasn't good enough. They outkicked their coverage in 2024. They way overachieved in 2024, considering the defense was not anywhere near playoff caliber. So I don't consider 2024 to be in the conversation. I don't consider 2022. The 2016 offense was top 2 or 3 in the NFL, but they couldn't stop anybody on defense. So that team can't be in consideration. The closest in this century by far would be the 2012 Redskins, but they're not at the top of my list either because the bottom line was they were injured. They were injured at quarterback. He was a big part of why they had gotten to where they had gotten to by winning the final 7 regular season games and having a 14-0 lead in the playoff game before he got hurt again. Or actually during that 14-0 lead is when he really injured the knee again. But it's not in the category of the teams I'm going to give you here in a moment. But this century, by far, the 2012 team would be the closest because I still believe that if Griffin stays healthy, that they win that game against Seattle, and they probably win the next week at Atlanta. But I don't think they would have won at Candlestick against that 49er team. I don't. I don't think the 99 Skins, they were floundering there at the end. Brad Johnson was banged up. I know they were very close to getting to the NFC Championship game, but it wasn't a great team overall. It was a really good offensive team for much of the first half of the season. I mean, they opened up in that 41-35 loss to the Cowboys by putting up over 500 yards, 35 points. Then they scored 50 against the Giants in week 2. They scored 48 against the Bears that year. They could really score, but by the time we got to the end of that year, Brad Johnson wasn't completely healthy, and they were never good enough anyway, defensively to make a deep run. They ranked in the 20s DVOA-wise in defense. I think you got to go back to 1979 for what I would call the first example of it, and then there's one other example of it. Although, let me just say that the 1981 team that started 0-5, by the end of that season, no one would have wanted to face Washington heading into the postseason. Nobody. They were playing that well. They won 8 of their final 11 games, and even the games they lost were super competitive. But I would not put them, at the top of the list. I have 2 teams that I would put on that list. The 79 Redskins were a team that ranked top 10 offense, top 10 defense. They were a really smart and well-coached team. The 79 team was, with Jack Pardee as the head coach and really the defensive coordinator. And then Joe Walton, who Theismann's always credited for really jump-starting his career as a quarterback. That team overachieved, but was really playing excellent football at the end of the season. And they had built up going into the season finale that year, a 10-5 record. In an NFC that was not loaded in 79. That was the year the Rams ended up making the Super Bowl with Vince Ferragamo at quarterback after beating the Buccaneers 9-0 in the NFC Championship game. The 79 season ended in Dallas, the final game of the NFL season on December 16th, 1979, with an absolute soul-crushing loss. We've talked about this many times. Many of you of a certain age certainly remember it. To me, it's probably the most devastating loss of my Redskins rooting career, for sure. They were 2.5 minutes away from being the 1 seed and the favorite to go to the Super Bowl with a 13-point lead, and Roger Staubach brought the Cowboys back and won the game 35-34. One of the great regular season games of that era, and just an absolute killer because Washington didn't even qualify as a wild card team at 10-6. The reason for that is earlier in the day, the Chicago Bears needed to beat the Cardinals by 42, by a point margin of 42 or more, and they did, meaning that Washington needed to win the game to win the division, or they were out, and they were out. That was the worst close and the worst feeling of, like, as Madden used to say, the finality of it all. It's like, oh my God, we were just the 1 seed 2 minutes ago, and now we're out. That team's number one on my list of the greatest Redskins team to not make the Super Bowl, and they didn't even make the playoffs. The other Redskin team that I would put on this list, the 74 Redskins of the George Allen teams, the 72 team got to the Super Bowl and lost to the Dolphins in Super Bowl VII. The 74 team was probably his best offensive team to go with, again, a dominant defense. They finished top 5 offense, top 5 defense in 1974. And even though Billy and Sonny were the quarterbacks going back and forth, the game that was devastating was the Clint Longley Thanksgiving Day game. If Washington holds on to the 2-score lead in the second half against Clint Longley, they would have been the division champ and would have been favored to make a very deep run. As it happened, they lost to that game. They closed the season beating the Bears 42-0 in the season finale, and they went to the Coliseum in L.A. to face a Rams team that they had beaten 2 weeks previous on Monday Night Football, and the winds were howling in Los Angeles. The weather wasn't rainy, but it was gusty winds, and Washington turned the ball over 6 times. Sonny Jurgensen, at 40 years old, came in for Billy Kilmer, and in his final game threw 3 interceptions, including a pick 6 when they were up down 13-10 and driving, that sealed the game. They also had 3 fumbles in the game. They had 6 turnovers in that football game, and it was 13-10 late in the fourth quarter with them holding the football. That team was, I think, George Allen's most complete team, or at least the team that had the better chance of being more explosive offensively than even the 72 team. Those are my answers, 79 and 74. Rob and Frederick, go ahead. Best Redskins team of all time not to make the Super Bowl.
Well, you stole my thunder because it was 79, but you also got to remember, I think they got a couple bad calls in Philadelphia that cost them a game that season. If these calls go the other way, we don't even need that game in Dallas.
Yep, right.
Yep. We got screwed twice, and the league should have investigated that Cardinals-Bears game because, they just laid down, and that's called what they call a points gouging or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Well, it was, the Cardinals obviously laid down and couldn't care less about Washington. Now, which game did you say in 79 that you said that they got screwed in?
I think they got screwed in Philadelphia with Harold Carmichael. I think he made a touchdown catch. They called it a touchdown, but his foot was actually out of bounds.
Okay. I'm looking at that year. I kind of remember that game. Remember, we didn't even know that they were going to be a good team at that point. They weren't supposed to be good in 79. They weren't supposed to be a good team. They had cratered the 78 season after they started 6-0 and ended up 8-8 and out of the playoffs. '79, they came back, and they were just a solid, complete football team that this was the truth. What they did best is that they let the other team lose the game over and over again. The one result that year when they played the Steelers, they got blown out at Three Rivers, but they would have absolutely been a threat and probably the favorite to go to the Super Bowl had they not blown the lead against the Cowboys. Thanks, Rob. Let's go to Joe in Springfield. Joe, go ahead.
What's up, Kevin?
Hey, Joe, how are you?
Great. So I got two, and one of them I'm going to ask you a question about it here. What do you think about it? I'm going to say 2005, and I understand that the offense at the end of the season, I mean, Brunell got hurt, but he played in that playoff game against Tampa Bay, and we won.
Well, the receivers got hurt, too.
Rogers,
they didn't have – Cooley and Santana were out there, but that was it.
Yeah, but the defense was playing well at the end of the season. If not for that Carlos Rogers pick six, we would be in Carolina playing them the next week in the NFC Championship. Remember, Kevin, all the top seeds of the NFC and AFC got eliminated in the second round, so the Super Bowl was up for grabs, really.
Yeah,
so
that was the Seattle-Pittsburgh Super Bowl.
Right, and if we had played in Carolina, who knows what would have happened against Jake Delhomme and the Panthers. So it was interesting to see that.
Remember, Joe, I considered the 05 team briefly. This was a team that won a playoff game with 120 total yards of offense, which I think is still a record. 25 net passing yards, and they won a playoff game. You're right. The defense was playing lights out. LeVar knocked Sean Alexander out of that playoff game, and Carlos Rogers, if he had gotten LASIK before that season, would have had a pick six to give Washington a 10-0 lead, which they probably would have been able to hold on to. But it was not a good offensive football team at that point. It just wasn't.
And my second one, and I understand that we got lucky getting into the way in the playoffs at the end of the 92 season after winning the Super Bowl the previous year. But when that little fumble exchange at the end against San Francisco, if we had beaten the 49ers, we would have played in Dallas the next week. It would have been a classic of the rivalry, having Washington and Dallas for a chance to go to the Super Bowl. Would we have beaten that Dallas Cowboy team that year in Dallas for the NFC Championship game? Because if we had beaten the 49ers, we have more confidence. And who knows what happens, but what do you think about that?
I think that the team was flawed. I think it was injured, obviously, during that year, banged up. The rip and holdout at the beginning of the year didn't help the year. But what you saw at the end of that season in 92, especially in that 49ers playoff loss, was literally like the heart of a champion, the defending champion that still had something left. But they weren't as good as those Cowboys. I mean, I hear you. It would have been awesome. You would have had literally every 10 years, 72, 82, and then 92, the Cowboys and the Redskins playing in the NFC Championship game. That game would have been at Texas Stadium, and the Cowboys were flat out better. And Washington got lucky, remember, at the end of the year with the fumble in the end zone with Emmett and Aikman and Jason Buck and the whole thing in the end zone. But I don't think that was a great football team. It was just an absolute resilient. They backed into the postseason. They lost a home game to the Raiders, and they should have been knocked out completely. But they got a reprieve the next day when Brett Favre was trying to get into the playoffs for the first time with the Packers, and they lost to the Vikings. But that candlestick game, there is no doubt that if it's not that kind of a field, if Rippon doesn't lose the handle before handing it off to B. Mitch, you and I could have run through that hole into the end zone, and Washington would have had the lead and all the momentum. But I don't think they would have beaten the Cowboys the next week, Joe. I don't.
Fair enough. Okay.
Chris in Delaware, go ahead.
Hey, Kev. Thanks for taking the call.
Sure.
So real quick, a little preamble to my team selection. I saw a stat last night. The 1999 Tennessee Titans were the only team in NFL history to lose 3 games to the same team. That would have been the Jacksonville Jaguars in 99. Lost 3 games to the Titans in 99, and they won every other game.
Well, hold on.
The only team that's ever.
The Titans, you said, when they went to the Super Bowl, how would they have lost to Jacksonville 3 times in a season?
Kev, I misspoke. The Jaguars won every game that season except for their 3 games to Tennessee.
Right, exactly.
It's the only team. Now, that is the lead up to my team selection here. 1986. If aside from a game where we lost to Dallas, and aside from a very close game that we lost to the Broncos, what turned out to be the 12-4 1986 Washington Redskins would have lost 3 games to the Giants. They would have also been the only other team to have lost 3 games to one team and won every other game. So my selection is the 86 Redskins, who lost in the championship game to the far superior and better New York Giants. But that
that's not right. What you're describing, it doesn't eliminate the possibility of the 86 Skins being the best team in franchise history not to make the Super Bowl just because the Giants flat out were better and beat Washington 3 times, including, by the way, let's not forget, in the division title match late in the season at RFK, where Washington got absolutely boat raced. But the thing about that team, and I considered that team, man, it was a sloppy team. They had the kicker issues, remember, with the Zendejases. Jay Schrader could absolutely at times keep both teams in the game at the same time. I don't know. It's not a bad choice. It's not a bad choice because in the NFC, they proved that they were the second best team in the NFC. And by the way, probably would have beaten Denver just as badly as the Giants did in the Super Bowl had they gotten there. That's a good one. That's a good one, Chris. Thanks. All right. Everybody on hold, stay there. I didn't know that we were going to have so many calls on this. I probably should have projected better. But if you guys stick around, we can reconvene in about 15 minutes after we talk to Mark Zuckerman about the C.J. Abrams situation. So we'll do that. If you can't hold, I totally understand. But we'll reopen it up for calls in about 15 minutes. The best Skins team of all time not to make the Super Bowl. I say it's the 79 Skins. I think the close second would be the 74 Redskins. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. Remember those days when the Nats were putting up 12, 13, 14 hits a game, scoring 8, 9 runs a game? Not recently. A fourth straight loss last night in Texas against the Rangers. They got beat 5-0 in this one. And they are now 7 games below 500. And if you even care anymore, they are 8 games out of the wild card race. In fact, as you look at the standings, this thing's going to end up being ugly. At one point they were right there, and they may end up being one of the 3 worst teams in the National League when all is said and done. Mark Zuckerman's been there all season long to cover it. Mark does such a great job with his Substack, Nats Journal. I would urge you to subscribe to it if you're a Nats fan. He's also the co-host with our good friend Al Galdi on the Nats Chat podcast. Follow Mark on X at Mark Zuckerman. When we talked before or during the lead up to the trade deadline, before the 4-game losing skid against Atlanta that led into the trade deadline, one of the questions I asked you was if they decided to become sellers and somewhat the perception was they're bailing on the season, how would that play in the clubhouse, like after the exciting first, 3-4 months of the season that they've had? They didn't help themselves by losing the 4 games to Atlanta going into the trade deadline. I know James Wood isn't out there right now, and some of the other players that they traded aren't out there, but just kind of help us with the vibe before the trade deadline and what it is now.
Yeah, it's changed pretty dramatically for sure. You had this team of a lot of young guys, a few veterans sprinkled in that was playing way above expectation, that was starting to believe in itself. And, the front office and the coaching staff was trying to convey that they believed in them as well. Said, hey, we can make a run at this thing. I know this is ahead of schedule and we don't want to disrupt our overall bigger picture plan. But, if you guys stay in this race, we're going to try to make a run at this. And then it all fell apart. The front office decides to trade away Luis Garcia and Curtis Mead and Foster Griffin. And then there's nothing they could have done about this or known this was going to happen. But literally the day of the trade deadline, a few hours later, James Wood hurts his oblique and is out and, is not really close to coming back yet. And so what you have left is a team that is just a shell of its former self, and it's playing like it. And I think inside there's an acceptance that they're playing out the string now. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's no hope in the longer term, that they aren't still potentially next year and beyond going to be a legitimate contender, but it has just completely changed the feeling about what this year could have been, and now what it does feel like, which is very similar to what we've felt like the last couple of years.
I kind of felt like the buzzkill of a few weeks ago made it just kind of easier for them to go with this C.J. Abrams move and announce it publicly and tell him, you might as well get all the bad news out right away, or at least perceived bad news. And I'm not saying that it's not the right thing, but let's go there because C.J. Abrams, at least through his agent, is not happy about moving from shortstop to second base. So how will this play out?
Yeah, we may find out tonight. This may be his first chance to play second base later tonight. We'll see. Blake Butera, said he just wants to make sure that Abrams has gotten enough work there and that he feels comfortable with it. And I give him credit that he's not just going to force this on him. He wants CJ himself to acknowledge that he's ready to give this a shot. So it may happen tonight, if not maybe tomorrow, but certainly within the next few days, he's going to play there. I think the overarching thing here, we've known for a long time that most people did not view him as a shortstop in the long term. The numbers suggested, even if you just watch him play, you compare him to other shortstops in the big leagues, he just doesn't make the same plays. A lot of others don't. I think what caught CJ off guard, certainly, and I think a lot of people, was the timing of when they decided to do this. I figured, and I think a lot of people figured, this is something you do in the off season and give him a full winter to both come to grips with it, on his own terms, but also then to have a lot of time to start working there go through a full spring training, and then, you're finally ready on an opening day, as opposed to, well, we're going to try to do this in the course of like a week in season and now see how it goes. Now, I've heard arguments from the team's perspective, which is, number one, there was no perfect time to do this. You might as, if you know you're going to do it anyways, you might as well do it now. Maybe because the season's kind of gone south, that there's less pressure, and see how it goes. And now by the end of this year, you have a better idea. Is this the plan moving forward or not? And maybe it even gets some interest from other teams who might have looked at him as a trade target, but didn't view him as a shortstop. Well, if he's good at second base, maybe that changes the dynamic this winter in terms of any kind of trade offer. So I think there's a lot of factors at play, but it's not as smooth a transition as I think anybody would have hoped it would be, because I think it's pretty clear he's not 100% on board with making the switch. And you can understand why. He was just a month ago voted in as the starting shortstop in the National League.
Well, I mean, based on his offensive.
From a class of some of the biggest names in the game, and he beat them all out, and deservedly so. And a month later, the team is telling you, well, wait, actually, you're not a shortstop.
Yeah, I mean, this is where I would lean on you. He's 25 years old. He's tied for second in the big leagues in RBIs. He's still top 10, I believe, in home runs. He's having a great season. He's really come into his own offensively. The idea that moving him to second may make him more enticing as a trade target bothers me as a Nats fan, because some of these moves, seemed like moves that indicated they thought they're actually closer to, contending for a postseason spot next year or the year after. Well, you don't do that without C.J. Abrams and his offense, do you?
No, I wouldn't think so, unless you're just getting big-time major league players in return. And, I don't want to make it sound like I think that's a foregone conclusion that's going to happen, but just in terms of like different reasons why maybe they would make this move now as opposed to waiting, is that it could tie into, getting other teams looking at him now as a second baseman instead. But, I think where it gets fascinating is you just outlined the numbers. Hey, he's ninth in the National League in WAR. Okay. He has been incredibly valuable in spite of his defense. And I've been trying to think back myself, like, is there a game this year they lost because of the defensive mistake on him? I don't feel like there has been. Like, yes, he's not been great out there, but I don't feel like that's actually cost them any games. So one respect to say, just play this out. Like he's having such a great year. Why would you mess with that? Especially for a guy who we know in the recent years has fallen off in the second half dramatically. And now you're going to throw this whole wrench into it. Now, maybe you also have to say to yourself, if C.J. Abrams is ever going to be the player that we believe he can be, and be get a 9-figure contract, whether that's with the Nationals or somebody else, and be a key player on a playoff team, he's got to be able to overcome these things and be able to deal with things that don't go his way. So, he's got to prove that he can play well for 6 months. So maybe there's some of that here too. Let's see how he handles all of this. But it does create just kind of an unexpected and maybe unnecessary dynamic here late in a season that has already kind of gone off the rails.
Yeah, I mean, you look at sort of the stats that are just shortstop specific. He's not ranked very high as a defensive shortstop. That's for sure. I just couldn't imagine going into next year with right now what would be, I think, increased expectations from Nats fans based on what they did, prior to the trade deadline, and then having the same excitement level if C.J. Abrams were gone. And I understand that you're not predicting that, but just suggesting that one of the benefits that might come is better offers if they were interested with him at second base. By the way, what is the latest on James Wood?
It's been slow progress. Anytime you hear the term oblique with a baseball player, you kind of know this is not a short-term injury. And I know they tried to make it sound like, it might be a minimal stay. It very rarely is. He's not shut down. I was watching him yesterday pregame. He's running in the outfield. He's taking drills. He's not started swinging yet. That's the main thing if you have an oblique. because the swing is what can turn that into a major injury. So, he's not done for the year, I don't believe. But that idea of, well, he'd just be out a couple of weeks, no, I think we're still several weeks away. He's probably going to end up missing at least a month with it. And that, I'm not saying that would have saved their season if he didn't suffer the injury, but boy, it was like, let's just add one more thing to this. You've already lost two of your best hitters via trade, and now your best hitter goes down too. And so I do feel for CJ Abrams, because all of a sudden he's the one proven hitter in this lineup. And they are still the highest scoring team in baseball. I don't know if that's going to last for much longer, because what else they have around CJ at the moment is not all that inspiring.
Luis Garcia Jr. had a home run in his first game against the Cardinals, a game they ended up losing. He has been horrible since. He hasn't hit his weight since joining the Yankees after that first night. So maybe they were right to do it, at least in terms of evaluating this season as like an aberration. About to sneeze. Sorry, an aberration season for him. I forgot to ask you one thing about CJ Abrams. What is help quantify the difference in value in terms of compensation, shortstop, second base?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're wondering why would he not be on board with this, even if he deep down knows that he's, not a great defensive shortstop. Well, shortstop is the premier position in baseball, certainly in the infield. And if you just look at the highest paid players at each of these positions, the top shortstops in the majors are getting 30 to 35 million a year. The top second basemen are making 20 to 25 million a year. So it's not hyperbole to suggest that this was like $100 million decision by the Nationals that could cost him that much. Now, the caveat to that is, it was some team going to pay him $30, $35 million a year to be a shortstop in the long run? I don't know that anybody would have done that. And so this may have just been inevitable regardless. But there, as much as like we just sort of philosophically think of, shortstop, that's where you put your best player, and second base is a lesser position. It bears out when you look at how teams pay these players too. And of course, if you're him and you're his agent, that deep down in the back of your mind, and you're basically now acknowledging that he's not going to make nearly as much in his next contract as he probably hoped he would.
There seemed to have been some buzz over Jackson Kent, the big lefty. Not a good start. These first two starts, I mean, he's been lit up. His ERA is approaching 10, I think. Some disappointment, in watching his first two starts, or is it just typical of, a new guy and some expectations?
No, it's disappointing. 8 walks in fewer than 8 innings. That's not good. Huge pitch counts all over the place. And I think, we all want something to cling to. And when you hear them say, hey, here's this young pitching prospect, and we know that they're so short on that, something to get excited about. Let's be clear, he was not some kind of elite prospect. Maybe within their organization, he was one of their higher ranked guys, but it's like he's not one of the top 100 prospects in baseball or anything like that. He was only drafted 2 years ago, so he's still very inexperienced. He just looks like a guy who's not ready for the big leagues to me. Now, I understand why they did it, and you might as well keep putting him out there and see how it goes the rest of the season. But I think even in a best case scenario, this was not going to be the future number 1, number 2 starter for this team. This is just maybe somebody who's part of a big league rotation. Right now, they're trying to cling to anything they can in terms of future pieces. The two legit pitching prospects to keep an eye on, and unfortunately this is more down the road, but Harleen Susana, who came over in the Juan Soto trade, and Travis Sikora, a higher pick from a few years ago. They're both recovering from injuries. Susana has started a rehab assignment in the minors. That's good. Sikora had Tommy John. It's going to be next year before we see him. But those are the two to keep an eye on in the long run, along with Cade Cavalli, who could become the frontline starters moving forward.
Well, that was my next question. Has there been a bigger positive takeaway this season than the way Cade Cavalli has pitched?
At this moment, no. That's certainly it. Earlier you would have said, "Hey, Luis Garcia, what a development." CJ's first half has been great, but yeah, I think we tend to forget that, Cavalli's been around a long time, but he was hurt for almost all of it. And so he was such an unknown coming into this year. Number one, could he just stay healthy? Number two, could he be productive as a big league pitcher? Well, what he's doing is he's consistently getting better start after start after start. His last one, he had a no-hitter in the seventh inning. That's not something we've seen happen around here in a long time. His last 7, 8 starts have all been outstanding. He's pitching tonight here against the Rangers. That has been such an important development because what they really need above all else is pitching. And here's a homegrown player who's finally coming into his own, and not just pitching well, but carries himself like you would want a young ace to carry himself. He views himself as the leader of the staff. And it's just been great to see for so many people who watched him through this whole process just to finally get back to this. It's been such an encouraging thing to see that happen.
Yeah, pitches tonight, as you mentioned, against Texas. Really, right now, for the remainder of this season, that's probably the primary reason to watch is when he's getting a start because he has been lights out recently. By the way, I just looked this up after mentioning because I've been sort of following the Garcia thing and his troubles with the Yankees. Foster Griffin's actually pitched really well for the Indians in 2 of his last 2 starts. 1 earned run each time. He's up to 14-4 now on the season with that ERA down to 3.18. All right. What am I missing? Anything in terms of any of the new players recently acquired and how they're doing? Do you have anything on that?
Yeah, here's what I'll say. We were just talking about Luis Garcia, and of course that's a big loss for them. But I'll tell you what, the guy who replaced him, Abimelec Ortiz, has been outstanding so far. And that's only 15 games that he's played. He came in the Mackenzie Gore trade from the Rangers. And while they had others in that trade that were more highly touted, they were several years away from the big leagues. We haven't seen any of them yet. Ortiz was the guy who was closest to big league ready. He tore it up at AAA. They brought him up after the Garcia trade, and he's hitting the cover off the ball. And you don't know for sure if that's sustainable. We got to see it over a longer period of time, but he's got a really good eye at the plate. He hits for power. He hit 5 homers in his first 14 big league games. He hit a couple of them to the opposite field, which is a great sign as well. And what they've done is combine Ortiz, who's left-handed, with Andres Chaparro, who's right-handed, and their production combined between them, they've more than made up for the loss of Garcia. As hard as that is to believe they could do that, they actually have so far. So that's an encouraging sign that maybe it is possible to replace some of these guys they've traded away, that they have good young players waiting, knocking on the door in the minors, and the coaching staff, the front office, has done a good job of putting them in a position to succeed and getting the most out of these players.
Just other baseball real quickly. Have you watched any of the Cubs White Sox games from the last 2 nights?
I've seen some of the highlights. It sounds like it's just been wild.
Total intense playoff atmosphere scene at Wrigley. I mean, it's been great. I've watched mostly highlights. I turned it on last night. It was 3-3, and the Cubs ended up winning in the bottom of the 9th. But just some really good baseball going on right now, and races for those wild cards in both leagues. I mean, a losing record in the American League is probably going to snag the 3rd wild card spot.
At the moment, yeah, the Rangers are under 500 and they've got the spot. The Orioles are remarkably in it.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy what's happened. As far as the Chicago thing, I went to college there, so I'm a little partial to it.
Right.
But I love to see both those teams at the same time. It doesn't happen often. The Cubs and the White Sox both good.
Has it ever happened?
I think they started in the World Series in about 1900 something. But
oh yeah,
not recently. And so to see that kind of energy and enthusiasm, the White Sox are such a great story. Nobody saw this coming from them. They have been absolutely legitimate. And the Cubs, I know the Brewers have been fantastic and lead that division, and the Dodgers and the Braves get a lot of attention. The Cubs are right in there with those 3 as the top 4 teams in the National League. And Pete Crow Armstrong is incredible and might actually win the MVP over Shohei Ohtani, which tells you how good he's been.
I mean, the odds right now are super tight. I mean, just so everybody understands, because this doesn't necessarily happen a lot in this sport. You'll probably cite examples, but in my memory is I remember the Reds had a really bad season recently and turned it around and were right there. But the White Sox lost over 100 games last year. They're in first place in the American League Central right now. And they're very likely going to win the division. I mean, I think they've still got a 4 or 5 game lead in that division. I mean, this has to be in the discussion of one of the great single season turnarounds ever.
Yeah, and I'll call it a 2-season turnaround. 2 years ago, they lost the most games in Major League history,
right.
121 or 22, whatever it was. So yeah, absolutely. Right now, I think they're the 2 seed in the American League.
I'm looking at it right now.
West
They are.
So bad.
They are.
It is absolutely remarkable. Some of it's young guys. Some of it is some free agent acquisitions that they've made. But I seriously, nobody saw this coming. I know the Nats would have been a huge surprise if they had pulled it off this year, but really nobody saw this happening with the White Sox. And that's a franchise that they've had a couple of moments in their history, but not a lot of them. There's been so much down periods for them. And, if you believe in the higher power, this has all happened since noted White Sox fan Pope Leo took over.
Yeah.
And maybe there's something going on there that they've fully embraced that. His White Sox fandom, they gave out Pope hats, I think, the other night.
By the way, just one last note. The Brewers won last night. The Brewers have the best record in baseball if you're not following it. They're having an unbelievable season. Ironically, I think they're bottom of the league in home runs this year, but have the best run differential in the season. But last year, they became, I think, the 3rd or 4th team in Major League Baseball history to win by a final score. It's the largest, shutout differential. 22-0 over the Mariners last night. 22-0. They also had 22 hits in the game. Do they look? I mean, we know what happens in the postseason. It's it's more random because it's not, it's a short series versus 162. But do you see them and the Dodgers as the best 2 teams in baseball?
You would think so, and I've been on the Brewers bandwagon for a couple of years, and they always get to October and can't get over that hump. The Dodgers, I think, swept them last year, completely exposed them. I will say, I do think the Brewers are legit, and what they're so good at is they use the full roster. No, they don't hit for a ton of power, but they hit for average. They make contact. The pitching is good. They just use everybody. They've got Jacob Mizorowski, who is incredible, leading the pitching staff. I do think this year, and maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I think there's those 4 teams in the National League: Brewers, Dodgers, Cubs, and Braves. And I don't think anybody else comes close. I know the Phillies have, at times, they've
legit, won like 5 in a row, and maybe a couple of the moves they made, including the average hitting average leader that they brought on. But you don't see them threatening.
I mean, they have the ability to turn it on in any given moment, but they've been so inconsistent that it's just hard to know what to make of them. So I look at those other 4 teams, and in the American League, maybe Tampa Bay, maybe the Yankees or Boston. I just don't think anybody else compares. So I do feel like it is coming out of the National League, one of those top teams. And the interesting thing, and I know the division races aren't that close, but watch the Brewers and the Dodgers, and I guess the Braves competing for who's going to be the top 2 seeds.
Yeah.
Because if you're the 3rd seed, you have to
the
host
wild
card series.
Yeah.
And so the Dodgers, as great as they are, could find themselves in the best of 3 series in which it could be over in a hurry for them. That happened to them a few years ago against the Diamondbacks. They do not want to be in that position. They're reeling right now with injuries and not playing well. I know all it takes is for them to get hot at the right time and they're unstoppable, but they're going to get to the playoffs, but they have to actually get through potentially a best of 3 first-round series that could ruin their entire season.
Yeah, and that best of 3 could be against like the Phillies, which would be a high-profile series. They played them
or
last
the Padres,
year.
who are playing really well now too.
I'm sorry.
The Padres too.
It could be the Padres
They're playing
too.
really well.
Yeah. How about Tatis Jr. last night? Great conversation. I'm actually enjoying this season. I just wish we had something to root for here because it looked like for a while there would be, but not right now. Thanks, Mark, as always.
Nope. You got it. Thanks, Kevin.
At Mark Zuckerman on X. And then you can link to his Nats journal where he covers the team via his Substack and does a phenomenal job. All right. I went longer than I thought I would with Mark because I was interested in some of what he had to say. That's why we had him on the show. We'll open phone lines back up for what we were talking about before Mark jumped on. 301-230-0980. Told you about the Aaron Schatz column, identifying the top 16 all-time NFL teams not to make it to the Super Bowl. And my question to you is, what's the greatest Redskins team of all time not to make it to the Super Bowl? The 83 teams out, they made it to the Super Bowl, even though they lost to the Raiders. What's the best Redskins team, Washington football team, Commanders team of all time not to make it to the Super Bowl? I gave you the 79 Skins, who lost that 35-34 season ender to Dallas. They were 2.5 minutes away from being the 1 seed and the favorite to go to the Super Bowl. I gave you the 74 Skins, who probably were better offensively. They were better offensively than the team that had gone to the Super Bowl 2 years earlier. Some of you gave me 2005, 99, 2012, was close. If RG3 doesn't get hurt, they probably at least get to the NFC Championship game. That was a really good team at the end of that season. 301-230-0980, Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. I'm going to read this. It's going to get me in trouble. No, it won't get me in trouble.
Uh-oh.
From Angela. I was just scrolling through, some in-show correspondence. Angela writes, Kevin, it doesn't seem to bother you to use the team's past racist names so casually. Maybe consider how offensive it is to so many Native Americans the next time you use it. Angela's listening to the show today, and we've mentioned the name Redskins a lot because we've talked a lot about Redskins teams from the past. The question, by the way, with the phones open, what's the greatest Redskins, Washington football team, or Commanders team to never make the Super Bowl? This is off of the Aaron Schatz story on ESPN, where he ranked the greatest teams in NFL history not to make the Super Bowl. The number one team, by the way, the 2023 Baltimore Ravens. No Redskins team, no Washington football team, no Commanders team is actually listed among the top 16. So I asked you guys, especially you old heads, give me the team that you think was the greatest team that didn't make the Super Bowl. For me, it's the 79 Redskins. They were 2.5 minutes away from being the 1 seed in the NFC playoffs, and an NFC playoff situation that wasn't great. It doesn't mean because their road or their path would have been an easier path to the Super Bowl had they gotten in, that's the greatest Redskins team to not make the Super Bowl. But that team was playing so well. They were so together. They were so balanced. They had Joe Theismann playing at a super high level. They didn't have great receivers, but they had Rigo in the backfield. They had Joe Walton, who was, a very good offensive coordinator. Jack Pardee, their head coach, was actually an excellent defensive mind. And they really got on a roll and ended up, being 2.5 minutes away from being 11-5 and being the 1 seed. And that's my number one. Number two is the 74 team, which probably was George Allen's best offensive team during the years in which they were always great defensively. Unfortunately, they went to the Coliseum in the first round of the playoffs. Well, before that, they lost an absolute killer game on Thanksgiving Day to Clint Longley and his, legendary exploits on Thanksgiving Day. If they had won that game, they would have won the division. They would have hosted playoff games instead of having to go to Los Angeles, where they lost on a very gusty day at the Los Angeles Coliseum, in which they played a game which was not typical for them that year. They turned it over 6 times and still had a chance late in the fourth quarter to win the game. So those would be the teams that I'd put at the top of the list. I want yours at 301-230-0980. So Angela, look, just to answer your email, I have over the years considered how offensive using the Redskins name is to Native Americans, and I've concluded time and time again that it isn't very offensive to the majority of Native Americans, which is why I continue to feel comfortable using it, and certainly am going to use it when referencing the team's history, because that's who they were. The 1979 team that I think is the greatest Redskins team to not go to the Super Bowl, they were the Washington Redskins. I think you should do more research on how offensive it is. And if you're going to give me the answer, if it's offensive to one Native American, that's enough for me. I'm just not going to have a conversation with you, because you can find 10, 15% in any conversation of a group of people that will be offended by something. All right. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. The best all-time Redskins, Washington football, or Commanders team not to make the Super Bowl. Let's go with, Robert in Annapolis has been on hold the longest. He's not a Redskins fan. He's not a Washington fan. But go ahead, Robert, weigh in.
Good morning. Well, this old head is going to mention the 1984, pardon me, Angela, Redskins. I thought they had a good shot to be the first NFC team to go to 3 straight Super Bowls. They won their division, And they did something that no other Redskins team did. They lost a home game at RFK. I
Right.
think you had about 11 or 12 home games at RFK in the playoffs, and that was the only one that was lost. They were, I'm pretty sure they were a favorite, but they lost, I think, to the Bears, if I recall.
Yeah, they lost to the Bears.
Correctly. And if I may ask you real quickly, you're killing me with the Ravens. There's a couple other teams they could have put in there. Where are the 2011 Packers? 15-1 with Aaron Rodgers, a near unanimous MVP pick.
I'm looking to see if they made the list.
That
they did not make his top 16. They did not make his top 16.
15-1, and they don't make that list.
Well, it's based on his measurement, DVOA, evaluation of teams. Look, you can't back off the 23 Ravens being a massive disappointment. Massive disappointment.
That was
not winning that AFC title game.
Actually, personally, I was more disappointed in the 2006 Ravens with Steve McNair and the 2011 Ravens when Cundiff shanked or hooked, I guess,
against New England.
Correct. I actually thought they were better all-around teams. That 23 team was really top-end defensively. They were a good offensive team, but look, you can't have a good team and not have disappointments. You know that. That comes with the territory. So I guess better to have those late-season disappointments than to be wondering where you're going to get ranking in the draft of the upcoming year. But there you go. That 2011 Packers, that definitely should be listed in there somewhere, I would think. But anyway,
let me just say about your answer, the 84 Skins. So a couple of things about that 84 season. First of all, that was the beginning of the 85 Bears. You saw it defensively throughout that season. You saw it at the end when they came to RFK and completely dominated. The final score was not indicative of how they dominated that football game. Joe Theismann got sacked, I believe, 9 times. I'm looking it up right now in the game. 7 sacks. In the game, 7, and he was under siege the entire game.
Well,
what'd you say?
Were you at that game? Did you go?
Yes, I was at that game. I was at that game. Richard Dent dominated the game in that game, and Walter Payton threw a touchdown pass on a halfback option. Steve Fuller was the quarterback that day. It wasn't even Jim McMahon, but they got shut out the next week.
You got to be Jim Fuller. Come on. You got to be able to beat Jim Fuller.
Steve Fuller.
Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, 2000 Ravens better than 85. Check any metric except for sacks. They outdid them.
I don't even need to look at it. The 85 Bears are one. The 85 Bears are one in terms of defense. But what I was going to say about that 84 season is that the 49ers were the best team, and they went on to win the Super Bowl as a dominant Super Bowl winner. So the Redskins were not going to get through the 49ers. And the Bears were better because their dominant defense. Washington definitely took a step back that season. They started off, Marino came into RFK in the season opener and threw 5 touchdown passes and beat them. They lost to the Niners. They got blown out by the Giants at one point. Typical of the Gibbs teams, they figured it out by the end of the year. They won their final 4 games. They won the division on the season finale against the St. Louis Cardinals. Neil Lomax's Cardinals and the Redskins played for a division title at RFK, and the Cardinals had a kick. Neil O'Donoghue had a kick to win it, which would have knocked the Skins into the wild card situation. That team was just nowhere near as good as the 83 team. Now, the 83 team's not in consideration for this.
You would know that, but you had Joe Gibbs and you had the home game at RFK. That's 2 things that's always
and the Bears smothered us. Thanks, Robert. Let's go to Mark in Largo. Mark, the best Skins team of all time not to make the Super Bowl.
You know what? You kind of stole my thunder with the 84 team, but the 79 team clearly is that team. Okay, let's get that out of the way. 79 team, but the 84 team, I would say, is too, and I'm going to tell you why. We got boat raced by Miami in the first game, 38-24. I remember that game. That was just a painful game to watch. The second game was when they started to come back. And I'm going to tell you this right now, Kevin, and this is my honest opinion. The 49ers did not want to see the Redskins in the NFC title game. Because when the Redskins came back and they almost won that game 30.
Yeah, they did almost win that game. You're right. You're right about
They
that.
almost win that game. 49ers did not want to see them in that NFC title game. That was the one team that scared the hell out of them because they knew they figured them out just like the 49ers figured them out in the NFC title game. So it would have been a great
49ers were so
matchup.
good that year, though. They were so
They
good.
Were.
15-1. Who'd they lose to that year? I don't even remember.
I agree, but here's the deal. They lost to Cleveland. No, yeah, they did. No, it was Pittsburgh they lost to. But here's the deal.
They lost to Pittsburgh, you're right.
They would have brought. There was a sigh of relief from Bill Walsh, just like it was a sigh of relief for Joe Gibbs, when they realized, you know what, if we beat Chicago, we don't have to go and play San Francisco in '87. So it's kind of strange.
No, you're right. Obviously, a two-time defending NFC champion trying to make it back to a third straight Super Bowl would have been a much tougher game at Candlestick for the 49ers than the young up-and-coming Bears were. There's no doubt. I just don't think, even with that said, because it's not so much about that. That 84 team was a good team, but it was a major step back team from the 83 team. Major step back offensively.
Without doubt.
Your phone's breaking up. Mark's phone is kind of breaking up, and here's the thing with Mark and Largo. It's already difficult at times to sort of follow the conversation. If we've got a phone issue, it just makes it much more difficult. So put him on hold. We'll get back to him. But let's go to Billy and Chantilly. Billy and Chantilly, best Redskins team to not make the Super Bowl. Go ahead.
Kevin, 79, I was 9 years old, so it didn't have the emotional impact. I know from my dad that was one of the great teams. But for me, I ran around in the woods after the game. It wasn't that. I feel totally vindicated, by the way. Just to our friends in the North, you'd have 3 more Super Bowls if they still had Flacco. So the way you started off the show, I think Flacco would have had at least 3 more Super Bowls with the Ravens. The greatest team, to answer the question, the greatest team that didn't make the Super Bowl is the 92 Redskins. This isn't even close. And I know 84 was good. The year before they won the Super Bowl, they were 14-2. They crushed the Falcons. They crushed the Lions. They crushed the Bills. The next year they go to San Fran, lose 20-13. They're winning that game if it's not for the fumble, and the young guys out there, they won't remember this. But then, Kevin, aside from that they would have won the Super Bowl, that 92 team, without a doubt.
I disagree.
Ripping,
but it's not even but keep in mind, Billy, it's not even about whether or not when they got to the postseason is that the best team start to finish that didn't win the Super Bowl. That team struggled that year. They struggled. They were nowhere near what they were in 91. They lost a season finale against the Raiders, and the Raiders weren't good. The quarterback was Vince Evans that day. And they weren't even that good, and they backdoored their way into the postseason. Now, once they got into the postseason, the championship DNA, kept them, they beat a Minnesota team easily, and then they had a chance after they were being dominated by the 49ers in the first half, they had a chance to come back and win it. But that team all year long struggled mightily. They were never even remotely close to good offensively. They weren't.
Kevin, they weren't, but they had such a champion's heart. It was unbelievable.
They did.
It was
I agree with that.
Culmination of like the Gibbs era was like it was on display. And when they lost that game, I wasn't heartbroken. I was heartbroken for them because I knew that every one of those players gave everything they had to compete at that level. And then, Kevin, for me, what cascaded after that? I mean, 92 was the crescendo. 93
that was it.
4-12.
That was it. We haven't been back anywhere close to it since. Yes.
Just Ken Cook dies, the stadium in Maryland. I mean,
if I had told you, because that was a tough loss to swallow, because I mean, I'll never forget that game's available on YouTube. Mark Rippon sneaks one in for a touchdown to make it 17-13 in the fourth quarter. He gets up, he spikes the ball and lets out an F-bomb. And you see Jacoby, who checked into the game for Lachey, and you see they know they're going to win this game. And they force the Niners for a 3-and-out. They're on the move, and the hole that opened up for B. Mitch, you and I could have run it in, and Rippon lost control of the ball when he went to hand it off. The field was a mess that day. But yeah, they were going to win that game. Now, would they have beaten Dallas in the following week in Texas Stadium in the NFC Championship game? Probably not. That Dallas team was really good, and they went in and laid it on the Niners the next week. But the overall team, they lost games during that year. I remember they played a Monday night game in New Orleans against the Saints, and it was hideous. They couldn't score. Like, literally, it was the opposite of the year before. So I wouldn't personally put the 92 Skins even on a short list. Now, in terms of their championship DNA and what they did at the end of the year, of course, that was fun to watch. All right, quick break. If you want to jump on, if you're there, I'll get to you, I promise. If you want to jump on with the best all-time Redskins team, Commanders team, Washington football team to not make the Super Bowl, I'll take a couple more calls on this. 301-230-0980, Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, theteam980.com. We're also seen on our Team 980 YouTube channel. Let's go to Ben in Delaware. Ben's got an answer on the best Redskins team never to make the Super Bowl. Go ahead, Ben.
Hey, Kevin. My choice would actually be the 1973 Redskins. Basically the same defense as the 74 Redskins that you talked about, but a much more balanced offense. Larry Brown in 74 was just such a shell of what he was in 73. And also the 74 team was missing Charlie Haraway at fullback.
Yep.
Which really weakened the running game even further. They were much more balanced on offense, and they went toe-to-toe in Minnesota with the Vikings in the divisional round.
Yeah, it's funny.
before
Kevin in
finally losing
Arlington
27-20.
Yeah, Kevin in Arlington agrees with you. He texted me. He said, do you think the 74 team was better than the 73 team? I do, but it was close. The 73 team, by the way, that game against the Vikings in that 73 playoff game is available on YouTube. It's kind of cool to watch. But the one thing about the 74 team, they were much more explosive offensively, whether it was with Kilmer or Jurgensen. They finished 4th overall offensively in the league in total yardage and in scoring, and still had a top 5 defense. And they were rolling at the end of that year. Remember, they went to the Coliseum to face the Rams on Monday Night Football. By the way, that was a Ron Jaworski start, if my memory serves me correctly, for the Rams. And they won that game, and that, got them into the postseason. The Clint Longley debacle cost them, I think, the Super Bowl that year. They would have been 11-3. They would have, I think they would have hosted both they would have hosted the divisional round, and then I think they would have potentially been, because the Cardinals won the division via their tiebreaker with Washington. I thought it's close, though. The 73 team was really, really, really good as well, and you're right, dominant defensively. Anyway,
they threw better in 74 because they had to, but the balanced offense in 73 allowed them the ability to control games and not have to throw.
Yeah. Thanks. Really appreciate the call, Ben. Let's go to Bernard. Bernard, go ahead.
Oh, hey, Kev. How you doing?
Good, Bernard.
Okay. So Robert and I think Mark kind of stole my thunder, but I kind of wanted to address that Pittsburgh 76 team. I know they had the 5 shutouts, right? But the thing is, they never really could have gotten a home advantage because they lost the first game of the season to Oakland, right? And Oakland was 13-1 that year. And so also they lost like 3 out of the next 4 games, and then Bradshaw got hurt in the 5th game against Cleveland. Yeah. So the game was never going to be in that Steel City, and I think the outcome still would have been the same.
But the question really isn't about necessarily – the best team that had the best path or didn't have the best path. It's just looking at that football team. They didn't make the Super Bowl. Is that one of the best football teams you've ever seen that didn't make the Super Bowl? I think that defensively, it's in the conversation with whatever, the 2000 Ravens, after the 85 Bears, who I consider to be the best defensive team in the Super Bowl era. The 76 Steelers defense was insanely good.
It was, but that first game against the Raiders, they gave up 31 points, and they also gave up 24 to them in the playoff game.
Yeah,
and
we're good. That's a great Raiders team.
Yeah, and that New England team, who, by the way, almost upended the Raiders.
The Raiders. That was the controversial ending with what should have been.
They called roughing the passer, if I recall.
But, right.
That New England team put some points on the board against that Pittsburgh team too, and they had this tight end who he's like one of those like Mark Bavaro types. Like he's not going to be in the Hall of Fame or anything, but
Russ Francis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He's great.
They had a crew. So yeah. Anyway, but Mark and the other gentleman stole my. I was with that 84. I thought they were feisty and. I thought they had won some games like in a close fashion that was going to serve them well down the stretch. And then Chicago just, eked it out.
They certainly were not anywhere near the best team in the NFC. The 49ers were that year, and the Bears were better as well. But that doesn't mean it can't be your answer in terms of comparing it to other Skins teams over the course of a long period of time. Thanks for the call. Really appreciate it. Paulie, stay there. I'll let you jump on to start the next segment, and then we'll get to some of what Dan Quinn said earlier today before a padded practice. Yesterday was supposed to be a padded practice. Turns out it wasn't. Might that be an indication that maybe some of the starters will play against the Lions on Saturday? Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. You'll hear some of what Dan Quinn said today before practice. They had a padded practice today. They did not have the anticipated padded practice from yesterday. He talked about the running back room a little bit today. He talked about kind of where he sees the team as a whole. And he did answer a question about starters and Jaden playing against the Lions on Saturday. A couple of calls just to finish up the topic at hand, which is the best Redskins team, best Washington Commanders team, best Washington football team to not make the Super Bowl. Paulie's on hold. Go ahead.
Big guy, L to the W, man. How you doing?
W. I'm good.
Hey, listen, man. I'm starting to like this Dan Quinn guy, man. He's starting to be my type of guy, brother.
Why?
You know what I mean? I mean, why? Because he's laying it all on the line, man. He's laying it all on the line.
How?
First year offensive coordinator, first year defensive coordinator, first year kicker. Like, this dude is laying it all on the line, man.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Hey,
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm starting to respect this guy, bro. You know what I mean? Hey.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm feeling him right now.
The kicker thing isn't like, I mean, they've had kicker issues. They needed a kicker. Like somebody was going to win the competition. I don't think, picking Drew Stevens is laying it on the line. I think to a certain extent, the conversation about going 2 new coordinators in the same year. Yeah, I mean, if he goes down, he's going down making decisions that he really feels strongly about, even though the Blau thing wasn't like against the grain. That was organizational as much as anything else.
Listen, we off topic here, but let me say this. Listen, that kicker thing is a big thing to me. You going Mar-a-Lago here. Listen, the kicker thing is a big
Hey,
thing.
Hold on. We never got Mark and Largo after his phone started to break up. He never called back?
No, he hung up and then didn't call back.
Oh, okay. Well, Mark, I hope your feelings aren't hurt. I can't have you, we need to catch every word you say, every third word, and we're going to spend the rest of the show trying to decipher what you said. All right, go ahead.
Well, we're giving him time now. Look, he's still saying a bunch of nothing. But anyways, look, but my whole point is with the whole kicker thing is he could have went safe. Knowing you got a new offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, one thing you want to be able to hang your hat on is a consistent field goal kicker.
Well, there weren't any options on the safe. There was no safe call. Listen, Jake Moody's not safe.
Out there. Yeah, he's not safe, but you could have went with another veteran guy. Could have found somebody. You could have waited for some. We still don't know. I'm just saying, man. The man's showing some gonads right now.
Give me your team that was the best Redskins team not to make the Super Bowl.
I wouldn't say it's the best. One thing about these Joe Gibbs teams that we're talking about, I know y'all going to the 70s little party, but mine is the Joe Gibbs era, that nobody wanted to see us in the playoffs. No matter what we did in the regular season, once we got to the playoffs, we was a different animal. You know, but the 86 team, I'll say that. Look, Jay Schrader don't wave Doug Williams back to the sidelines. I think we win that game. The man said he played the last 3 quarters. He don't remember the game. And it showed. He was very lethargic out there the rest of the
You're talking about in the championship game against the Giants.
Right. Against the Giants, right. Doug Williams get on that field, we win that game, bro. We win that game. And I'm also going to throw my hat. I'm also throwing my hat in the ring with the 99 team that lost to Tampa. You know, we had the offensive firepower, we had a solid defense, just didn't have the long snapper. You know, special teams.
That 99 team was just a breath of fresh air because it had been a while. We had not been to the playoffs since 92. And early in that year, Paulie, unstoppable offensively. I mean, with Norv calling the plays and scheming it up with Steven Davis
it was what we envisioned from Norv Turner when we hired him as head coach.
But by the time they got to the end of the year, man, they were hurting and they were just, I think they finished in the bottom third defensively per DVOA for that particular season and scoring and yardage and everything else. It wasn't a good defensive team. But yeah, it still would have loved to have seen them play St. Louis. the Rams.
Right. That would have been a fireworks show, most definitely. But yeah, I'm gonna give Norvell credit for one season. It was his best season. It was his best offensive team, and that's what we envisioned.
Well, yeah, it was his best quarterback.
That's what we all thought we was going to see. Right.
Yeah.
Year in, year out, that's what we thought we was going to get from Norv. So, but for me, in my heart, it's that 86 team. I honestly believe if Doug plays that game, we win that game. So
yeah, I mean, Doug just hadn't that 86 team. Remember, Doug he was the backup, but he didn't play. It's not like what happened the next year in which Doug started to get time, and then it was like, wait a minute, we'd much rather have Doug. In that moment, I don't think anybody was thinking about Doug in 86. I mean, I'm going to go back and look at this, but I don't even think he played at all in 86. That was all Schrader in 86.
They didn't have to think about Doug. Because Doug was Doug, as we can see, he was a baller.
But remember, but Doug came here in 86 after basically being in the USFL for a few years and having sort of been forgotten as an older quarterback. Nobody was expecting what we got from Doug in 87. And in 86, Schrader had a great season. I was never a big Schrader fan, but he threw for 4,000 plus yards that year. Still threw it to the wrong team a bunch of times, but with Clark and Monk and Sanders and Kelvin Bryant, on that 86 team, with George Rogers on that 86 team, it was a good team. But Schrader.
Williams fan, man.
Oh, well, so am I, obviously. And the next year we realized Doug could still do it, and everybody clamored for him. Sure.
I know everybody might have. I'm just talking about me personally.
Oh, in 86? Yeah. Look, to me, the Tampa Bay days were long in the rear view at that point for him. He hadn't been in the NFL in 4 or 5 years.
The USFL days wasn't. And I watched the USFL, and Doug was my
I watched it too.
Players.
I gambled on it. I was in college. I was gambling like hell in the USFL. All right.
He tore that league up too, man. Hail to the W.
All right, you too. Kurt, go ahead.
Hey, how you doing, Kevin?
Good, Kurt.
I agree with Paulie about the 86 team, but first I want to talk about the 74 team real quick.
Yeah.
The 74 team is really good, and I think I heard you say, I may have misheard you, but I thought I heard you say Ron Jaworski was the quarterback when they went out to L.A. to college.
Am I right about that or not?
No, it was Roman Gabriel. Okay.
No. Roman Gabriel was not with the Rams at that point. It was either James Harris or Ron Jaworski. You're thinking of the 71 season. The first George Allen season, that was Roman Gabriel. But at 74, I'll pull it up right now. It was either James Harris or it was, but I think Ron Jaworski started the game.
Was that a Monday night game when they was out there? Was that Monday night?
Well, in 71, George Allen's first trip back to L.A. was to clinch a playoff berth, and Washington won that game in the Coliseum in 71. But the 74 season, they were out there late in the season on Monday Night Football as well. And hold on.
Game, they went out to
a Ron Jaworski and James Harris, both quarterbacked in that game.
It was Ron Jaworski? Okay,
yeah.
My bad. I had
That's
the wrong
okay.
Game in
No,
mind,
you're just thinking about the game 3 years earlier.
Right, but to the point, that was a good team, but I think the 86 team was better.
Okay.
But I'm going to disagree with Paulie on the point of Doug Williams making a difference, because I think in that championship game, they beat straight up in that game. They just were not better than the Giants, period. They were not, okay? The Giants were just better up front. Their front seven was better, okay? And they beat straight up, but in that game, Parcells out-coached Joe Gibbs in that game.
Well, they were better. They were better.
They were better, but he also outcoached them because he used the conditions to beat Joe Gibbs in that game.
Yeah.
Neither team got 200 yards of offense. Okay, but we got blanked 17-0 because Parcells used the conditions to get that lead, and then once he had it, okay, Joe Gibbs couldn't do anything with it because they couldn't run the ball. Passing the ball, they only had one real shot, and Gary Clark dropped the pass.
Yeah,
but other
the deep
than that,
one.
they couldn't do nothing. But the pressure, Doug Williams would have been to deal with that pressure because of the lack of mobility. But the team,
I'm looking this up right now because the problem with the idea. Look, the question isn't, closest to the Super Bowl. It's the best team that didn't make the Super Bowl. Because obviously
because Kevin.
Yeah.
Traded through for 4109. Okay, they had George.
That was the
Rogers
final number.
and
Yeah, I knew it was
Bryant.
over 4,000. 4109 for the season.
They had a good running game with the 1-2 punch with George
Rogers and Bryant
and Kelvin Bryant. Okay, the defense was pretty good. They were pretty good that year. Okay, and that was
what did Joe Morris run against them that year? Because Joe Morris had massive games against them, right?
He did. Okay, and one game they played them, I believe the World Series was going on at the same time.
Yeah, that's the Monday night game, and that's the Game 7 of the Mets Red Sox World Series.
They were
exactly
hollering for the game. You couldn't tell what was going on, but the bottom line was they were overwhelmed in their game until they had a couple. Schrader made one long pass to Richie Sanders, and I think
you're talking about the Monday night game. By the way, Joe Morris had 181 yards that night. 181 yards.
They were just stronger up front, but the team overall was a very good team, Kevin.
It was a good team. I guess what skews me, Kurt, about the 86 Skins is that Jay Schrader threw for a lot of yards. There's no doubt about that. Jay Schrader was not a good NFL quarterback. He had a big arm. He was athletic, but he wasn't a smart quarterback. He threw it to the wrong team too much, took too many sacks, even though he was an athlete. He didn't see the game. I would start there. Secondly, about that 86 team, they got hammered a couple of times, didn't they? I'm going to look it up here. Didn't they get blown out by Dallas that year?
They got blown out by Dallas and Texas. And
Dallas 30-6 at Dallas. They lost 3 times to the Giants. Remember the touchdown pass to Gary Clark in overtime with all the Zendejas misses against the Vikings. They almost lost to Denver late in the season. I don't think that would have been an Elway team. Yeah.
That was because of Zendejas they lost that game.
He missed the extra point, right? Didn't he miss an extra point? Yeah.
He missed an extra point. I think he missed about 2, maybe 3 field goals in that game.
You got a good memory. You got a good memory too. I don't know. When I just started thinking about answering this question without looking anything up, 79 was the first team I thought of. Because that team was legitimately a 1 seed with 2.5 minutes to go in the regular season. And they had earned it. They were balanced. They were good defensively and smart. They were good offensively and smart. That was Joe's real breakout season as a quarterback. And by the way, you know this, Danny Buggs, Ricky Thompson, am I right about the receivers? John McDaniel, they didn't have great receivers. They had Riggo and Benny Malone. But that was a really good football team that just week in and week out put together game plans and played at a level.
The reason I say they weren't the best, though, Kevin, is because they were cohesive, but they weren't explosive on offense. They nickeled and dimed with a lot.
That's true. That is true. Buddy Hardeman, Clarence Harmon, yes.
You know they made a mistake in that game. They put too much pressure on Monty Coleman to have him check Preston Pearson one-on-one. That's what hurt them.
They also had the fumble late when, and then obviously the 3rd and 2 where Riggins got stopped by Larry Cole in the backfield. And I mean,
that was a huge play. That was huge.
Yeah, because that was a first down away from, running the clock out.
Think about it. In 86, how many teams were really better than them? The Giants.
Well, in 79, how many teams in the NFC were better than them? Vince Ferragamo took the Rams to the Super Bowl.
Right. Nobody was better. But in 86, only the Giants were really better. Nobody else was better. Nobody else. If you think about it, nobody else was better.
The Giants crushed the Bears, right? They shut out the Bears. No, the 49ers. They crushed the 49ers, right? In the first round of the playoffs in 86. Am I remembering that correctly or not? Was it the 49ers they beat first?
Yes, you are. And they beat the 49ers.
Oh, badly. It was like 49-7.
Yeah. So,
here it is. 49-3. 49-3.
The Giants humiliated the 49ers in that game.
Yeah, and
They
look,
really did.
the Redskins were there because the Bears had to start Doug Flutie in the playoff game. Remember that too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's true. But they
Doug
still
Flutie
outplayed the
had to
Bears.
start, and he was incapable of playing football
They
at the
were better
NFL
than the
level at
Bears.
that
They were
point.
more balanced than the Bears. The Bears had the defense.
Bears
but
went
the teams were more
14-2. They were
balanced.
the 1 seed, but they had to start, or the Giants were, but the Bears were also 14-2, and they had to start Flutie in the playoff game. That was a big benefit
But
with McMahon out.
Their 14-2 was different than the Giants 14-2.
Oh, I agree.
Because the
I
Bears they were not as good a team as the Giants.
I
They
agree.
didn't have
But not having
competition.
McMahon, not having Fuller, like Flutie was like the third or fourth quarterback, and that's who Washington got to face in the divisional round.
Right, that is true.
So,
but that 46 defense, they still had to go up against them.
Yes,
and
he
they
did.
Took care of them.
Yeah.
Wasn't nobody hurt on that defense.
No, but didn't Flutie hand the ball over to us a bunch of times in that game? I got to go back and look at it. All right, I got to go. That's a great call, Kurt. Really good call. Kurt's got absolutely memory of our football team bona fides. Let me just see how many turnovers Flutie had in that playoff game. 2 interceptions in that playoff game. He was 11 of 31 for 134 yards, 2 picks. I mean, he was not capable of being an NFL quarterback. The Bears overall had 4 turnovers. Let's see if he had one of the fumbles. So he had 3 turnovers in the game and was 11 of 31. I mean, it wasn't like Schrader was great in the game. He was 15 of 32 for 184 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. They won that game 27-13. That's not the Darrell Green punt return game at Soldier Field. That came the next year. Washington beat Chicago in Chicago consecutive years in the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. The next year, Jim McMahon was back. They were healthy. That was Walter Payton's final season. And Washington went in there and won the game with Doug Williams, and the rest is history. They went on to beat Minnesota in the NFC title game, and then obviously Denver with the greatest quarter in Super Bowl history. Thank you, Kurt, for doing that. Just thinking back to those 86 Skins, though, they get to the NFC title game, but they beat a 14-2 team on the road with literally their third string quarterback starting the football game because both McMahon and Tomczak were hurt. All right. Some of what Dan Quinn said earlier today when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com.
plan in terms of whether he plays, how much, or any of the starters? Have you all had that conversation? Have you made a decision on that yet?
No decision yet, but we'll go through today and then to tomorrow, and then we'll hit onto those after we see kind of the health of everybody and where we're at. But he's throwing a really good camp. I'm very pleased with what I've seen from him. New system, owning it, being in charge of it. So he's off to a hell of a start.
Dan Quinn earlier this morning answering the question about starters and Jaden in the preseason game Saturday against Detroit. I would bet you they have a pretty good sense of what they're going to do, but he's not saying it yet. You know, the team has a growing list of injuries, banged up players. I saw Nikki put the whole list together and put it out. You know, the more recent are Johnny Newton, and then Jordan McGee, Jerome Ford. But the list is long. I'll go through it here soon. Obviously, the most devastating by far in terms of long term is the triceps injury to Laramie Tunsil. So Quinn had a lot to say as he talked before what today was a padded practice. Yesterday was not a padded practice. And I suggested yesterday after we played the Quinn soundbite talking about, you know, would he be okay if Jaden didn't play in a preseason game? And he said, yes, he'd be okay. Because they're getting these padded practices because they've got another joint practice. Well, yesterday, for whatever reason, there wasn't a padded practice. I don't know if that'll end up driving a decision to play Jaden in the starters, but this was Quinn on sort of factoring the padded practices in with the preseason game decisions for starters.
And you've obviously talked about a competitive camp throughout. For some of the starters, like today will be like the first time in full pad since the joint practice. How have you kind of factored in the practices with the preseason games in order to determine the level of physicality? Has anything changed, I guess, over the course of camp?
Can you repeat the last part, Ben? Sorry.
Has anything changed over the course of camp in terms of the planning with the physicality?
Oh, no. Okay, good question. It hasn't been a change of plan. So like going into it, you wanted to make sure where could we put those practices to have the highest, you know, return for that space. So the joints are obviously one, today's one, the earlier ones to go. And so each of those practices features a little bit more line of scrimmage work and not the loose downs of second and longs and third downs, but actually like today we have a short yardage period. That's that type of emphasis. So when I lay it all out, you kind of look to those days and then make the specific emphasis for it.
I don't even know what he said. I mean, it's the first time I've listened to that answer. I'm not even sure he really answered Ben's question. Ben's question was a good question. You know, basically, he's referred to that these padded practices, the joint practices, we'll see how those go, you know, before making a decision on the preseason games. But I don't think he really answered that question to go. I don't think I got anything out of that. Did you get anything out of that answer, Max?
No, it was kind of dancing around and repeating a lot of the same stuff he said in the past.
Yeah. Okay. You know what? When it comes to who's going to play in these preseason games, we'll probably find out Saturday at about 10:30, 11 a.m. Game starts at noon when we get some sort of list of players who aren't dressing. And then we'll probably know. Maybe we'll know tomorrow. I don't know. So Quinn was asked about, you know, the growing list of injured players, and he gave an update on a few of them.
Can we get an update on some of the guys who weren't out there yesterday? I think it was Odafe, Caleb, Jordan, and then Johnny Newton.
Sure. Let's start with Caleb. So he injured his knee in the joint practice. Not significant, but we are being smart in that spot. Johnny Newton injured his pec during the game. He's currently in New York, seeing a specialist there. So I'll give you an update tomorrow after, you know, their meeting. Owe has a strained calf, kind of the early phase of that. We're, again, just being smart there. Jordan McGee, I think, was the other one you asked about. Injured his shoulder in the game. We'll hold him out this week, but nothing that's going to like linger into, you know, the season or any of that.
The Newton thing's interesting, right? I mean, he didn't appear to have made a significant positive mark in his play, and now it appears that he's unhealthy with a pec injury. There was a follow-up question, I think, from John about Johnny Newton's pec and the long-term concern about it.
A long-term concern for Johnny?
It could be. I'll have an update today about, like anytime like go see a specialist, with a pec. So it could be.
Okay. So, we're now talking about, Tim Settle's banged up. Now, apparently there's some good news on him. Johnny Newton, Oweh, Chason, a lot of players banged up on defense right now. Am I forgetting any? Settle, he's coming back. I think Newton might be more serious. Oweh, Chason, Jordan McGee. We know that Trey Amos, has had the ankle, and that's, getting to be a bit of a concern, perhaps. So a lot of the players were expecting something or banged up. Typical of training camp. I'm not getting overly alarmed about it. You don't want a Tunsil situation with anybody else. And hopefully there won't be a Tunsil situation with anybody else. This was Quinn earlier this morning talking about just the entire team as a whole and what stands out so far.
Hey, Coach.
Good morning.
3 weeks into training camp, second preseason game. Where do you see this team overall as a whole? What do you like that's standing out, and what are some things that you feel that you want to see?
Yep. So I'll first start off with the things that are standing out. I like the competitive makeup of the training camp practices that the guys have had. Don, I thought they've really pushed it against one another. So, like, even in a practice like yesterday when I highlighted the film, there was one-on-ones from O-line to running backs to linebackers, down to the wide receivers and corners of the red zone. So I like the situational football that the guys have done. You'll see some more of that today on some 2-minute and 4-minute at the end of the game. So those would be two of the things that I'm pleased with. And then the things that I want to see cleaned up is like pre-snap mistakes. We've had false starts, in practice. We've had them in the game. I'm just talking specifically to offense. Defensively, kind of the same thing, like a communication has to be on point. It's every single play. So those are the things I'd like to see get rid of, some of the self-inflicted penalty, and those ones. I recognize, like, when you're moving fast, mistakes will happen, but those pre-snap ones, like, we've got to get rid of that.
Yeah. Pre-snap penalties are self-inflicted, and sometimes definitely when you get to the regular season, pre-snap penalties, I think as fans, it's one of those things we see as coaching. Like, they weren't prepared. They're not holding these players that continue to do it over and over again, accountable enough. I think that's one of those things when, as a fan, and we're not always right, we're probably wrong much more than we are right. But when you start talking about teams, you're like, they're just poorly coached. They don't look. False start penalties, encroachment, offsides penalties, the lack of discipline when it comes to those kinds of penalties appears to be something that can be coached up. So let's, I think last year, didn't Connerly, I'm pretty sure Connerly was among the league leaders in false start penalties in the league. It wasn't Tunsil. Tunsil was at that, was at the top of the list when he was in Houston for false starts. It was a big problem with him. But I think last year, let me go to the penalty list. By penalty, false start.
Washington had the most, 33.
They had the
total.
most false starts in the league?
33 total, 160 yards lost. Trying to find the player.
Yeah, I see that for false starts. But I think it was Connerly that led the way. Am I right? Yeah, this is right now by team. I need it by players. I'll find it. I will definitely find it. But
Josh Connerly had 9 last year. He did not lead the league.
Was that the top?
He did not lead the league. Latham in Tennessee had the most with 13.
Okay, but was Connerly like top 5?
No, not top 5. But he's still 9 is still up there. The most
9's a lot.
The most was 13. So for reference, that's kind of he was towards the top.
Yeah. Right. And Tunsil actually had a much better year for false starts compared to his previous years. Pretty sure.
Oh, my apologies. He had 7 holding penalties and 6 false starts. That's the breakdown I'm looking at right now.
Sorry, so 7 total. Wait,
So
we're losing people here. I'm looking at. I finally have it. I've got the false start count. So, Latham, as you said, 13, then 12, 11. So that's tied for fourth. By count. Yeah, he's 7th. He's tied for 7th in the NFL last year with 9 false starts. But what else did you say about him penalty-wise?
So if you look to the right, because I assume we're looking at the same chart, there's going to be this little tab that says offensive holding 7, false start 6.
Yeah, I'm not looking at that one. I've got to pull it up by penalty. It's okay. Offensive holding. Yeah, it's by team now. All right, let's move on. You gotta be buttoned up. You can't lead the league in false starts. You can't do that. Especially with 2 games on the road to start the season. Those are drive killers. Penalties, sacks are number 1 in drive killers. Penalties are number 2, other than turnovers, obviously. He talked about Jaden Daniels today and what specifically he's seen from Jaden. I think this question gets asked every other day, but let's hear what he said today.
Hey, good morning, Coach.
Good morning.
You've brought up Jaden Daniels in the camp that he's having so far. So can you just share? I mean, this is year 3 with you all together. Just what have you really specifically seen from him in this camp? That, I mean, I know of course he's year 3 in the NFL, but
yeah,
what do you really love about him?
I love that he's decisive. As a quarterback, he's got like a unique ability to put the ball in the right location, and so not just to what's his completion percentage, but like what's the accuracy, and that's even above the completion percentage. There could have been a drop or something, but it was in the right location. So I like that he's in a system that he is now at the line of scrimmage working more things, and so that might be the biggest difference, Candy, between the last couple of years and this year is like him at the line of scrimmage and working through. So he's done a good job with cadence. That's not something that we've done here before. So those are a few of the things that don't show up on the stat sheet that he's doing a really good job with.
They seem to be really happy with Jaden Daniels' camp so far. Everybody seems to be really happy with that, which is good. We won't know until they actually play a game how it manifests itself. I'd love to see him under center a few times on Saturday. I don't know that we're going to see that. There's a little bit more from Quinn. We'll play some of that, and then I want to switch subjects to something else that came up in sports last night. We'll do all of that and more. Let me mention that all of our training camp coverage on the Team 980 is presented by Xfinity. Score the most reliable Wi-Fi, one price, 5 years guaranteed. Xfinity, imagine that. Dan Quinn had a few other things to say. Before I get to that, I want to mention BMW of Silver Spring. They've become my new favorite people. Steve Surecki, Dave Strassman, all the guys out there. I've been a BMW guy for a long time, 3 decades, over 30 years, when I go back to the first one I ever purchased and or leased. And it's been an X5 for me in recent years. I went to see my guy, Steve Surecki, and the team at BMW in Silver Spring recently. In my particular case, Steve found a vehicle. He's great at doing that. And he got me into an even nicer X5 than the one I was driving. My payment didn't even go up. That never happens. It was a really good day hanging out with Steve and all the guys. They've got over 350 vehicles in stock and a 4.8 star rating. There's a lot to like about BMW of Silver Spring. Go see Steve, my guy, and his team today if you're interested, or just visit bmwofsilverspring.com. I wanted to play 2 other quick sound bites from Dan Quinn. This was a question, I think, from Nikki, who asked him about if Jaden's changed anything. They've been talking about how he's been throwing so accurately, so well. He's looked so sharp. Was anything changed with Jaden's mechanics or anything else to get him to throw more accurately?
And then going back to was Candy's question about Jaden, you mentioned his accuracy. Could you tell if he changed anything in the offseason? Was that something that you guys urged him to work on?
He worked extremely hard, but that's him, like in that way. I just feel like the pocket that he's in, his routine is right. That the team around him of getting everything organized and ready for him to play. Like saw him this morning early, getting ready with Chad. Like he's got a good routine, a good process, and I think what we're seeing is some of the result of that. But also his connection with the players, this much depth, this much route. They've spent a lot of time together, so it's nice to see even early on, like he and Steph, like Terry and he have all these time now, so it feels good. So adding Steph into that group, that's been a big deal. He might have 10 or 12 targets so far, Steph does, and I bet he has 10 or 11 completions. So that speaks to also Jaden in the right spot, in the right location. And also to Steph, when do I sit down? When do I try to beat this guy? And so it's been nice to see that relationship grow too.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would add to it, and he didn't say this, but I think he certainly would, is that, first of all, Jaden was accurate coming out of college. He was very accurate in his rookie season. As a first-time player playing with players for the first time at the NFL level, he had a 69% completion percentage, and we saw it all that rookie season, just how accurate he was, how quick release he is, how accurate he is throwing the football. I mean, again, when it comes to evaluating anything that happened last year with any of the players that barely played football, have at it if you want. It's not for me. I got to see a much larger body of work to give it a fair evaluation. He played 4 games start to finish. He only played in 7 out of the 17 total. And of those 17, much of what he was expected to have in the game with him, supporting him, around him, wasn't in the game. Yes, his completion percentage dropped from 69% to 60.6%. Do you think it had anything to do with the fact that he was playing 1 week, then not playing for 3, then playing for a half, and then not playing for 2, and then having guys in the game that he had never really thrown with before? Not to mention, and it is fair to say that not having Terry around for the entirety of training camp probably impacted their connection as well. But the conversation about how sharp he's been, how accurate he's been, is nice to hear, but I don't think I was expecting anything else from practices where all of their best players that they expect to play football this year are all out there. And then finally, this was Quinn talking about Brandon Coleman, stepping in for Laramie Tunsil and what that looks like so far.
Kevin, last one. Brandon Coleman working with Laramie over the offseason and now moving to left tackle. Have you noticed anything as he's come back to that position where you're like, oh, he picked that up from Laramie, or any traits that you've seen from him?
They definitely work together, even like through the offseason of some time where Brandon was working guard and tackle when he did do some of that. That'd be a better one for him on like the specifics of it. Brandon's got really good feet. We can always feel that part of him. So I think he's definitely comfortable at tackle. Like it seems natural in a lot of ways for him to be in that space. I don't know if I feel a different spot, in between, but that'd be a good one for him. But they've definitely spent a good bit of time together. And I would imagine if you spend much time with Laramie, there's going to be some tips to learn and some insight to gain, offense or defense.
Well, also, let me jump in real quick. I don't know that we've kind of talked about it on the show, but Tunsil's going to be, when he's recovering from his surgery, spending time in the facility, which a lot of guys don't typically do, so he can get work in with Connerly and Brandon Coleman.
Yeah, he just can't play on the field during the games, which would be nice. But yeah, no, I mean, I love that Tunsil's going to stick around and be a part of continuing to mentor these young players. Look, they're going to have to be ready week one. Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Jonathan Grenard, if he's actually ready to play, Jihad Campbell, this is the, on paper, arguably one of the best 2 or 3 defenses in the league, and maybe the combination of players and defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio, it is the best. They're going to have to be ready. There's going to have to be different game planning to account for Brandon Coleman versus Laramie Tunsil. Maybe Brandon Coleman will prove at some point that he's as good as Laramie Tunsil. But you go from essentially game planning for any opponent saying, we're good at left tackle. We're good there. Now, if he's facing Myles Garrett, by the way, very possibly will, because they face the Rams. Even if it's Tunsil, we got to account for Myles Garrett. We got to account for Will Anderson Jr. They've got some really good pass rushers on the schedule this year. We talked about some of the defensive teams on paper heading into the season that they play this year. It's daunting for sure. But with Tunsil, it's like, let's focus on the rest of the line and where we need to get help protecting wise, where we need to chip, where we need to double, where we need to absolutely think about its quick game, especially in certain down and distances. We're not going to risk it on 3rd and 14, dropping back against Myles Garrett and Aaron Donald, or if it ends up being both of them. But you don't have to do a lot of helping when it's Tunsil. We'll find out how it works out with Coleman when we get there. I wanted to just close with this. I saw this story on CBSSports.com yesterday, a story about college football's most expensive rosters heading into 2026. I sense that most of you know that players get paid, not only NIL money, but also salary cap money now. But did you have any clue that LSU's roster this year with Lane Kiffin in his first year will be the most expensive roster in the country, with an overall payroll of $50 million plus? They paid this guy, Jordan Seaton, a Colorado left tackle that was in the portal, $4 million plus annually. He'll be the highest paid non-quarterback in our very brief history of NIL. But the roster for LSU this year will be $50+ million. Miami's roster is expected to be in the $40 million range. Darian Mensah, who was at Duke last year, is getting, by the way, he had a $4 million plus contract at Duke. So there's no official, word on what Darian Mensah is going to get paid at Miami. Obviously, Miami's a better opportunity to compete for a national championship, but it's going to be north of $4 million a year. The big price tag at Notre Dame, they've got a $40 million situation as well, will be CJ Carr, their quarterback, who may end up making $6 million plus. Ohio State's in the $30 to $40 million range as well, as is Oregon, Texas A&M in that $40 million range. I mean, it's insane what these players are making, which ultimately leads to a chance to see players more often in college football rather than them taking off. They're staying because they're getting paid. If they're not going to be a first or second rounder or, a first day or night 2 pick, they'll stay. The problem, of course, is they don't stay with the same place. They jump around. Yeah, $50 million roster at LSU this year with Lane Kiffin. All right, done for the day. Chris is next.